To have the greatest impact on the elections in November 26th, high-profile trials of the Democrats should begin in May, and so that they make noise all summer. By the end of the summer, the Democratic Party will look like pieces or a pile of ashes. Yes, that probably sounds better. A pile of ashes from a burned-down nursing home. Active preparations for high-profile cases that will shock America, have already begun since January 1st.
Good to see you, my friend. As they say, look for who benefits. That's what the House Oversight Committee is doing now. They are carefully investigating the rapidly growing family wealth of Ilhan Omar Jesse, a member of the so-called squad. This is especially relevant after the scandal with fraud in Somali social services. For $9 billion, some say $19 billion, exploded in her Minnesota congressional district. Chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer, states that his team's lawyers are considering taking the extraordinary step of subpoenaing Omar's spouse because of his questionable business practices. Republicans want to know how Somali-born Omar and her well-connected husband, Tim Minett, went from nearly bankrupt to wealthy. She declared about $30 million for 2024, quoting Comer, all in just 1 year. Many are questioning how her husband gained so much wealth in 2 years. It's impossible. He's a big shot. Minett and his partner Will Haler founded an investment firm for Jesse in 2022 called Roselay Capital. At that time, they had $42 in their account, but within a year it grew to $25 million. According to Omar's statement, by the way, he also has a wine business that grew from nothing to millions in his accounts. No wonder the employees were confused. They reported the violations and drew federal attention to help sort things out. As for her, Congress has repeatedly, and I'll say boldly, denied her guilt, while carefully criticizing the ongoing investigation. But, sometimes they say, Jesse, that those who shout the loudest have the most to hide. They say, Jesse, those who shout the loudest have more to hide.
Ilhan Omar is a member of Congress. From Minnesota, she once pushed through a law as a result of which Somali pirates, bandits, I don't know what to call them more precisely, managed to siphon money from the Minnesota state budget. Well, now they say $9 billion, maybe even more, which is exactly half of all the state's social welfare funds. 6 million residents were counted over 7 or 10 years. I can't recall exactly, but that's the time frame they used. Ilhan and her husband themselves mysteriously ended up with $30 million in their accounts. Ilhan said it was a miracle. I think she's sure that the stork brought those $30 million in its beak. In Minnesota, it wasn't just Ilhan, but also the state leadership. I mean, Governor Tim Walz. For example, they were covering for gangsters.
You can tell from his body language and eyes that he's panicking, and honestly, I don't blame him.
Why is the governor panicking? Because one after another, his own subordinates started going to the FBI to tell how he personally silenced them so that the truth about the theft, so to speak, wouldn't spill out, God forbid, to the public. Everything stays in the house. You can't air your dirty laundry from the palace, right? Minnesota's top 3 leaders are the governor, the attorney general, and the mayor of Minneapolis, the largest city. They are under investigation, no more, no less, for persecuting those who try to expose their crimes. In other words, they are finally being prosecuted for prosecuting people. John Salomon is a famous journalist I've mentioned before. He's likely one of the best investigative journalists in America.
The main news we've received in the last 24 hours is that Tom Emmer is the 3rd member of the House Republican leadership. He officially confirmed that congressional investigators are now working with staff from the state of Minnesota. We knew there were these informants, these state legislators who talked to them. They have now become federal and congressional informants and are signing written statements. And according to Tom Emmer, what is in these statements is what people are saying. I personally spoke with the governor and his staff, Governor Tim Walz and his team, and I told him about this fraud, said that it needed to be stopped, but they did nothing. They looked the other way. This is very important. Now, Tom Emmer said, I think this is enough to bring criminal charges and put handcuffs on this person. Now, this is a very important point because Congress will take this testimony, they will make a criminal referral, and there is a United States attorney in Minnesota, not flashy, not glamorous, but they are preparing indictments, and they are serious about it. It's likely Tim Walz will appear before Congress. But this evidence, if Congress hands it over to the United States Attorney and the Department of Justice, could lead to Tim Walz becoming a subject or target of this investigation.
Gentlemen, sure enough, justice moves incredibly slowly, and the laws in the United States do everything possible to protect the accused from unlawful actions by the government. A tremendous amount of effort was put into this by the Founding Fathers to make sure that the government couldn't easily prosecute us. But if we start today, by May or June, I think many others will be in court over this case. And along the way, so much dirt will be thrown that it won't be easy for anyone. The Democratic Party, not just of Minnesota, but of the entire United States, they'll get a big helping, a big helping.
And honestly, in my opinion, this is criminal in nature, and people are talking about it. Tim Walz appears directly involved in theft and corruption, shielding scammers and thieves instead of serving the public. There should be criminal liability here, which is why we said charges should be filed. It seems we're finally heading that way. And once you start to understand the details, it becomes even more incriminating. Because Tim Walz not only ignored the whistleblowers, he also turned away and closed his eyes to it. But, as we already know, again, like some damn mafia boss, he took revenge on them, and not in some minor way. No, he obviously
directly threatened Miss Rarick. You mentioned the harassment that many faced while trying to expose fraud and corruption in Minnesota. Can you tell us more about that? What do people experience when they try to raise the alarm?
Miss Sledovet, well, this backlash has been going on for quite a while. If you look at what Faye Bernstein said in a news report or in the Newsweek article, back in 2019, it started for her. She was thoroughly investigated, and she was actually transferred to another government agency. They retaliated against her in every possible way you can imagine. And now the retaliation has intensified, and you could lose your job, lose your home. We will watch your children. We will make sure you can't get a job nowhere else in the state government. And for Minnesota, that probably means Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hennepin County, Ramsey County. You can't get a job where Democrats are in charge.
It's one thing to be a fool, to have a bad governor, a bungler, a jerk. And it's another thing to know everything and threaten people who wanted to rid the city and state of thieves, bandits, and crooks. In general, for some reason, Democrats they sympathize, not with the victims, but with the criminals. It's some kind of phenomenon, either psychological or political, I don't know. They are constantly fighting for the rights of prisoners in jails. I get it, basic human decency is necessary. Why should he have been very comfortable in prison? I don't understand. In my opinion, it shouldn't be very comfortable in prison, so to speak. It's not terrible there. It's not a dump. We're in the 21st century, not the 14th century before Christ, by the way. The 14th century before Christ. Conditions may have been better before than now. So basically, the Democrats don't let us judge. They don't let us judge thieves. They let rapists out of police stations. That's absolute nonsense. They say it will happen to your children tomorrow. No, they will protect them. Yes, they don't let federal agencies catch and deport or evict illegals, even if they've killed someone in the United States. And even if there have been such cases more than once, they've already released people several times who committed more than one murder in the United States. They trust that they'll show up in court in 2 months at 7 a.m. Yes, I'll be there. Okay, that's good, but did you understand me? No, I don't know any English. That's just how it is. At the same time, those who suffered for some reason don't get any sympathy from the Democratic Party. It's a phenomenon. I don't know why. Well, except for the exceptions, except for the cases when a white police officer did something to a black criminal. Even then, yes, all the attention and all the sympathy go to the victim, to the black person. If, God forbid, the victim turns out to be black, then they bury him in a golden coffin. And they cry, of course. They cry more than people do at their own parents' funerals. Or, for example, if a member of Make America Great Again took, I don't know, a stick, an axe, a gun to defend himself from Antifa, Black Lives Matter, or less organized hooligans, then the one who took the gun, even Democrats sometimes took guns, look what happened to them. It's terrible because then he's considered a criminal, and you have to protect the victims or potential victims. They're the ones you should pity and protect. but in all other cases, they pity and protect the criminals.
If you ask me, the crime rate here is just off the charts. According to the charges brought here, Tim Walz threatened these informants with losing their jobs, with homelessness. Obviously, even with a veiled threat of persecution, tracking your children and telling you that you'll never be able to get a government job again, it's absolutely unthinkable. Threats to the family? Again, this guy seemed to be acting like a damn mafia boss. But again, the essence of the accusations here isn't exactly new, although we're getting more details, and it seems the charges will be revealed soon. We already knew a lot of this, but I think the topic of this video should be Tim Walz's problems, his legal issues, the accusations, they're all multiplying. After all, it's not just about revenge, not just about criminal complicity and negligence, not just about threats. The latest accusation that's also coming up is that Tim Walz's employees are being accused of, quote, falsifying reports. Government officials were forging documents to cover up the misuse of taxpayer funds.
So these documents were supposed to exist, but they weren't there. We requested them, and suddenly they appeared. And, at least in one case, it was completely fabricated and backdated by 2 years to create the impression that it had always existed and was done on time.
And this problem, I think, could be the final nail in Tim Walz's coffin. I mean, how is he going to avoid this? Are you saying that as governor, as the head of the state, he had no idea that his staff were fabricating and forging documents? Come on. Everything points to the fact that these orders most likely came from him, and now that so many public servants and officials have turned their backs on Tim Walz, this is probably the next domino to fall. What happens when these criminal accomplices face serious charges? We've also heard his staff are under investigation. What if one of his staff, jailed for forging documents or altering data, turns in little Timmy Tampon to save themselves? That could be the next step. These Democrat rats will start devouring each other as they try to escape the sinking ship, and sticking to the topic, this is not the end of his legal troubles. After all the sanctuary city issues and obstacles, plus the chaos and violence being encouraged in the streets, Tim Walz and Jacob Frey now face new legal issues, both under Department of Justice obstruction of justice charges.
And if I may interrupt, regarding the breaking news we had at the beginning of the broadcast, I just spoke with a high-ranking American official. They confirmed that both Governor Walz and Mayor Frey are under investigation for possible obstruction of justice for encouraging the public to resist arrests. ICA. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to quickly share this confirmed report as promised.
I think this is really a situation where Walz is putting pressure on these people.
So what will come from Minnesota, I think it will be an explosive start to the end of spring, beginning of summer. And what else, you may ask? Yes, the Ku Klux Klan Act was adopted during President Lincoln's time. They call it the Klan Act. The law states that breaking into churches, causing riots there, committing violence or threatening violence is a special and serious attack on a person, on inner freedom, and so on. This is a crime, even if there may not be physical harm. In Minnesota, this act was specifically passed so that physical harm is not required in order to prosecute. At that time, it was created for, well, racist actions in the southern part of the country. It involved churches with black parishioners. People broke in and did things, I don't know how many times, but incidents happened repeatedly. This act was used, and even the authorities used this act. So it's not something they pulled out of some old chess, but nowhere does it say that only black people can't be broken in on. Therefore, when in that same Minnesota, by the way, the incident happened that everyone is discussing now, in a church where gathered Christians were praying, by the way, of all skin colors, not just some particular group. Yes, the feds unexpectedly used this law. I already said Biden probably used it, but very rarely, of course, because it has direct relevance to our current ideological struggle. The thing is, leftist activists fighting against Trump and the deportation of criminals from the United States broke into a church where mostly white and mostly conservative citizens were gathering and socializing. Their pastor was speaking there. I don't know the exact denomination of this church, whether it's a pastor, priest, or whatever he's called, to explain things to those who were praying there. It will be very bad for them and their children if they do something or don't do something there. Yes, the interesting detail is that this supposedly spontaneous protest Well, how spontaneous could it be? Organizers were immediately found. He ended up there completely by accident. One of the most left-leaning and dishonest television anchors, named Don Lemon, sour lemon. Don was fired not so long ago from cable news network because even for them, he was too much. Well, as they say, don't get carried away, but he really got carried away. So, as he says, he just happened to come to this church with a camera, a cameraman, and lighting. Well, he just happened to get the idea to stop by at exactly the time when a massive, spontaneous attack on the parishioners took place.
The FBI really does intend to press charges against the protesters who were in the church last weekend. And some members of the media also reported that they are going to press charges against a certain Don Lemon.
Raw Story reports this, and National Broadcasting Company News appears to suggest it, though I'm unsure if that's true. I didn't hear in the interview with Harmit Dillon what Raw Story heard, but I should be ashamed to try to, push something that would make a great headline for them. Anyway, here's Don Lemon, who was part of the group because apparently he was covering it. See his happy little face. He used to work at Cable News Network but went too far and now he's out on the street. He's talking to regular people to get their opinions about what's happening.
He said he's doing journalism, a rather strange, very strange expression. When he decided to join these protesters, he was like this tag-along who went to the protest in the church, which, by the way, was absolutely illegal. Don't let him claim he was there as a journalist. The fact is, they entered the church and protested, which was highly illegal.
Tell me, what was the point of that?
Is this more of a secret underground extraction operation? We show up in a key place where no one expects us at all, and we disrupt the usual order of things. That's exactly what we're about to do.
What that was. Eyes leave, that's what they're saying.
So they burst into a place where people gather with a main idea, which means those who burst in are there to cause chaos. Honestly, I don't understand what can they achieve with this. So they burst in, I don't know. Maybe they think that at the next elections, the parishioners will decide it's better to vote for the left. Otherwise, these lunatics will show up again. I don't understand, so to speak. I think it's just, who knows, maybe that's just how the human mind works. Once again, for those interested, the salary for this kind of work is $1,000 a week, 6 working days. If you come in your own car and are ready to drive straight to Patriarchy, pretending that you're about to run him over, or maybe you actually will, God forbid, or maybe God willing. Then it's $1,200 a week, but the gas is on you. I'm not explaining, I'm not handling your recruitment. I saw a similar ad on Craigslist in Los Angeles. And here comes the hero himself. So Don Lemon is a liar and a disgusting careerist. Well, see for yourself.
You heard what some people were saying there, that they don't belong there, they shouldn't feel uncomfortable, and this is our home and all that. That's the whole point of the protest, to make people uncomfortable. You may not like it, but if they went to church, any church,
No, you're not right, buddy. You're absolutely wrong. You can't just walk into a church like that. It's not some public corner or street. Okay, it's private property owned by specific individuals. You can't just barge in there and say, I'm going to terrorize these people. I'm going to scare them. I'm going to yell and disrupt their church service. No, that's actually unacceptable.
It's like coming into your house and starting to protest in your kitchen. See?
Carmit, I just looked up the Ku Klux Klan law since it's my first time hearing about it. Here's what I found. Could you explain to us, since we just read the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, how this is an obvious, blatant, clear violation of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act? Because they entered a place of worship, pursuing and threatening. We just showed a video of a bearded man who threatened to attack Christians praying there, so that seems like an obvious violation of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. I've never heard of the Ku Klux Klan Act before. Can you explain it to us?
Harmeet. Yes, the Ku Klux Klan Act is one of the most important federal civil rights laws, and it goes back to the time when President Lincoln freed the slaves. Southern states, mainly Democrats, denied equal rights, and law enforcement often persecuted newly freed slaves. The Ku Klux Klan Act is a law that makes it illegal to terrorize citizens, violate civil rights, and conspire to do so. It's often used against law enforcement, but now it's applied to others too.
So the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, but the sides have completely changed. Here's what's funny. Back then, it was used to stop whites from terrorizing blacks, but now it seems we're fighting against blacks who are trying to terrorize whites. How many people have been arrested in Minnesota?
10,000 arrests, $9 billion were stolen, and a major American hospital went bankrupt. And the Democratic governor and mayor who tried to prevent federal agents from exposing this are now under federal investigation.
Why is the hospital closing? Our hospitals are American. They are required to admit patients or those who have been injured, regardless of whether they can pay for treatment. The state or the city reimburses the costs for medicine, doctors, surgeries, electricity, and everything else. Of course, the hospital issues a bill, states how many uninsured patients it has treated, describes what was done, receives a certain total amount, and once a month or once every 3 months sends this to the city or state authorities, depending on the hospital. It is assigned either here or there, so to speak. Since the year 2000, they have been reimbursed for this. So for over 25 years, we have spent $745 billion this way. That's about $35 to $50 billion annually. For what we pay for, we cover the treatment of people who don't have money to get medical care, let's say in a hospital. The expenses there are about $100 million a year. And out of that, 2 to 3% are poor, undocumented immigrants. That's usually about 2 to 3%. The hospital sends a bill. If it's $100 million and 2 to 3%, well, you understand that's $2 to $3 million. And so to speak, they get paid for it. And if it's not 2 to 3%, but 20 to 30%, then the hospital provided services not for $2 million, but for $20 to $30 million. The report then is sent to the state, written on paper, and they can write anything they want, while a state like Minnesota squandered it, or like California and stole everything there was. And now the hospital has nothing left, so the state gives nothing to the hospital, and the hospital definitely has debts. What is a debt? It's an obligation to pay salaries to doctors and nurses and to the electric company, which says if you don't pay, we'll cut off the electricity. Try performing surgeries without electricity, and to the pharmacists, so to speak, the companies that say, you haven't paid us for the last delivery, we won't supply you anymore. Next, they can't exist if they're not paid for their goods, whether it's a pharmacy or, the electric company or a doctor. Well, you can't go 1 month, 2, 3 without getting paid, but you still need to eat. That's their product, their time, their effort. They file lawsuits, and the hospital can only sell off its equipment to pay its debts, which means the hospital has to close. But what about the patients? Will they just go to other hospitals again? So it will be the same thing. Bills will be sent to the government, and by government I mean either the state, the city, or some federal agencies. Depending on the hospital, it may be affiliated with various organizations which now have even more responsibility. The hospital isn't paid, leading to its bankruptcy, which then causes more hospitals to go bankrupt. The process that started in Minnesota is called, how do you say it? When dominoes fall, yes, the domino effect, or whatever it's called. You understand what I'm talking about.
This isn't some third world country or a banana republic. This is Minneapolis, January 26, 2026. And what you're about to see is a scheme of how so-called progressive governance is destroying an entire city. What's even scarier is that this was planned, not accidental.
But let's get back to the arrests. 10,000 have been deported from the United States.
These numbers are called staggering. Yesterday, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem made a sensational statement that shocked the entire political establishment. More than 10,000 illegal immigrant criminals have been arrested in Minneapolis alone since President Trump's second term began exactly a year ago. 3,000 of these arrests have taken place in just the last 6 weeks. We are talking about murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and those whom Noam called incredibly dangerous individuals who have killed Americans, harmed children, and spread terror in Minneapolis.
You understand that these are 10,000 criminals who were not only in the United States illegally, but also committed crimes during their stay, often serious crimes. So the Democratic Party was bringing murderers, thieves, rapists, and fraudsters into their states. For what purpose? Yes, to fill their own circles, Democratic circles, and get more seats in Congress. It's directly connected. They were throwing United States citizens, their own voters, onto a rusty nail or onto many rusty nails, just to get it in Minnesota. For example, so that they get one additional seat in the United States Congress. How many people will be killed for that? So that they get one additional seat in the United States Congress? I don't know. A lot, I think. The Democratic Party loves us in a strange way, like that Georgian with the tomatoes you've probably heard about. Yes, I love to eat them, but otherwise, no, I don't love them. No.
His the single margin, the largest federal immigration operation in American history. Almost 3,000 immigration and customs enforcement agents, border patrol officers, as well as federal investigators arrived in the city of Minneapolis. Not for a photo shoot, not for some empty symbolism, but for the sake of justice. Justice that is cold but uncompromising and tough. And this justice will undoubtedly reach the very top of the corrupt and absolutely incompetent government of the state of Minnesota. Both Governor Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, are currently officially under investigation by the United States Department of Justice on charges of criminal conspiracy to obstruct the activities of federal law enforcement agencies. And you need to let this fact fully sink in so you can truly appreciate and deeply understand the seriousness of what is happening here. While members of the Mara Salvatrucha 13 gang and cartel operatives were being removed from their streets, Walz and Frey were allegedly working to stop these arrests. I've seen this mentality myself with my own eyes. I have friends on Facebook who criticize immigration and customs enforcement and support the protesters because they believe the Trump administration is terrorizing vulnerable communities. That's the exact term they use to sort of mask their fantasy, trying to make sense of what's really going on here. Vulnerable communities. I mean, this level of gaslighting we're seeing here completely calls into question the very concept of basic common sense.
So either the Democratic Party leadership are idiots or they think you and I are idiots. And I think the second option is more likely. They think you and I are idiots. They actually know what they're doing. They know they're committing crimes. Well, they know. How could they not know, right? But as usual, they're hoping they'll get away with it, that someone will cover for them. The judges are their own people. The prosecutors are their own. They'll overturn the court decision. And even if there is a trial, they'll acquit them or just give them a fine of 8 rubles and 14 kopecks. And the Democratic Party will pay. The mayor, the press will be on their side. And corrupt politicians from both parties will cover for them. By the way, the combat-trained squads paid for by the Democrats, Antifa, Black Lives Matter suffragettes, people who've lost their minds, transgender people. Oh, Lord, I just can't bring myself to say that word. That's how much I like it. So, killers trained for revenge, brainwashed by the methods of Goebbels, the Clintons, the Obamas. There are quite a few of them, gentlemen, and just because there are many, don't forget, we really like that. When you become sponsors of the channel, it helps, and also what you find on this channel, This is real life in America. I've never seen or heard Americans from the inside in any Russian-speaking space. In fact, nothing that I tell you, nothing like what we tell you, because a whole group works on this. I'm just the one telling it. Send copies of this video to your friends, share it, write comments. This all helps to bring everything I'm presenting to a wider audience. A couple more words about Minnesota, then we'll move on. Everything there is rotten, completely rotten, no matter where you look. For example, here's what federal investigators found in the department. There's a Department for Small Business or something like that, and they have a small business loan division.
Federal agencies are deepening their investigations into the fraud case in Minnesota. Even the Small Business Administration stepped in, using advanced computers to track these schemes.
The agency has suspended loans for almost 7,000 Minnesota borrowers linked to the COVID-era Paycheck Protection Program and Small Business Administration loans. If natural disasters cause economic damage, more may follow.
They have already found 6,900 fraud cases totaling $400 million, and this is just the beginning. They have already found 6,900 fraud cases totaling 400. We're handling a $400 million case, but I only notice amounts in the billions now. Yeah, but investigators say there will be more. We already know it. Here's a young blogger whose report about Minnesota actually stirred up America. The last thing was needed, that final straw, or as they say, the last drop, for people to just go wild, and he added that last drop.
How did he get this advice?
Yes, I knew about the fraud back in June. Locals from Minnesota started telling me about it, but at that time they were too afraid to speak out against it.
Today, Nick is in Congress, where he will talk about the details of his findings, about what wasn't included in the main report. Once again, everything is ready for the congressional hearings after the decisions of the Government Oversight Committee. There is a Government Oversight Committee that meets, makes decisions, and relays its conclusions to congressional leadership. Until November, it's Republican because most elected officials are Republicans. Congress must vote on whether to refer the case or multiple cases to the prosecutor's office. They are already preparing materials there as well, combining the Congress's demands to investigate the state and the materials they have already gathered. And they've already gathered enough by summer, so the fireworks, groans, screams, and wailing will start with Minnesota. I really hope so. But as you'll hear now, the thread will start to unravel. I don't know how it will go there. Congress will vote for the government. It's in November. The Republican majority of Republicans was chosen. So by November, the Republicans were chosen. They've gathered enough.
Because they're afraid of a negative reaction in their communities. And over the past few months, I've been gathering information, and a person from my video named David had all the information about the fraud, and that's how I was able to go and shoot this video.
So the president says that this scandal, this fraud, could now amount to up to $19 billion. That's just a staggering amount of money. Well, based on the investigation you've conducted, is it possible that such a large amount of money and such widespread fraud could have happened without the knowledge of local leaders? Whether it's the mayor, Governor Walz, or Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who represents this district.
Yes, I think most of them knew about the fraud. I mean, the mayor, Frey, openly stated on live national television that the fraud is very real. Therefore, we can't claim they didn't know about the fraud since they openly admitted it. They openly admitted that the fraud went on for so long and did nothing to stop it. That's why.
What is your best guess if they are actually involved or somehow know about it? Do you think it's a money laundering scandal or just straightforward enrichment?
Maybe both. I mean, the fact that they were moving money through airports, it's no secret that millions of dollars went through Minnesota airports. And here's what's interesting, how Ilhan Omar's net worth went from negative to tens of millions of dollars.
It really is very interesting. And by the way, the Transportation Security Administration is almost entirely made up of, well, almost all of its employees are from the Somali community there in Minneapolis. So, you know, the fact that those suitcases full of cash got through is another interesting point. Now that you've done this report, I know you've been in that community trying to dig deeper. Have you had any, let's say, comments from the Somali community? Are they asking why you're investigating here? Or are some of them, you know, ashamed and saying we're embarrassed and we want to help you because this shouldn't have happened?
Yes, I haven't received any messages from people wanting to help counter this fraud. I went there myself.
As you understand, Congress is preparing an investigation similar to the one in Minnesota, meaning states, cities, other states, and so on. Well, have you heard, for example, any talk about California? Yes, in about 4 or 5 months, I predict the future like Cassandra the prophet. We will find then a country furious about what the Democrats have done to them From Clinton to Obama, from Hillary to Kamala to Biden, and everyone else in between. Now we will be shown more and more deception, theft, fraud, and then the thunder will strike. And here comes California.
California has spent
Over $24 billion
over
the last 5 years with little progress.
That's actually all until the next theft, of course. But I want to finish on our most painful point called elections. How did it happen that in the year 2020, suddenly 10 million more voters voted for Biden among the Democrats than in 12, 16, and then in 24? So they suddenly found 10 million and then lost them again. Where did they go, or did they never exist at all? Maybe then who and how drew them, because it really looks like they were just made up. Who is rigging the United States elections?
Benny, do you remember how the reliably red state of Arizona miraculously flipped to Joe Biden in 2020 by just 10,000 votes, and it shocked everyone? They announced it as quickly as possible and then started putting people in jail. If you asked questions, it seemed very suspicious. In Arizona, there were electronic voting machines, and then, when a more honest election was held, Donald Trump won by hundreds of thousands of votes. In 2024, just a few years later, it's strange that it happened right there. It just doesn't make sense. Maybe we should ask about the machines, what those voices think, since the Trump administration has already questioned them. Tulsi Gabbard said, "We are studying machines that alter and interfere with voting results, and we've found evidence of this. Check it out."
Top experts are handling this, including election integrity. We have evidence of how these electronic voting systems have been vulnerable to hackers for a very long time and susceptible to manipulation of the results of the votes cast. What further advances your mandate to implement paper ballots nationwide so that voters can trust the integrity of our elections?
The electronic voting machines used in Arizona and built with software from Venezuela are not accurate and can affect the outcome of the elections. Well, President Trump wasn't ranting when he explained that now that Nicolas Maduro is in captivity here in America, he was kidnapped, and that we now have all the evidence we need.
I think that Maduro is paying for every glass of water, for food, for a fork, for dry socks, by giving information.
Alex Jones is paying. His initial response, his reaction to this was, well, we'll learn everything from Nicolas Maduro. Because the entire axis of evil in our country and globally passed through Venezuela.
Are they now going to make Maduro expose Pelosi and the Democrats, the Clintons, the Bushes for their involvement in drug trafficking? I wouldn't expect the prosecutors to act soon. But Trump is definitely putting an end to United States sanctions, as well as money laundering, supporting it, and election rigging. It's not Venezuela or China in control, but the deep state CIA using China, Venezuela, and Cuba. Cuba, Mexico, and Ukraine are in serious trouble, and Scheinbaum's operation, their mothership, is also at risk. Venezuela, which had this incredible budget and all this incredible money, not for its own people, but for control, that's gone now.
That's how it's going to happen. After all, President Trump just went to the global elites in Davos and once again decided to declare that yes, the elections were rigged, and that we have all the necessary evidence to prosecute these people. Lions.
That's when the globalists started having massive heart attacks, because many of them used the same machines and the same fraud as the Democratic Party of the United States of America. By the way, George Soros' heir and our California governor, Gavin Newsom, were in this very hall and must have soiled their diapers, which I'm sure they had put on just in case.
Just think about it. A vast ocean. This is a war that should never have started, and it wouldn't have started if the presidential elections in the United States hadn't been rigged. Those were rigged elections. Now, everyone knows they've found out, and soon people will be held accountable. It might be sensational, but that's how it should be. Those were rigged elections. You can't have rigged elections. You need strong borders, strong elections, and ideally good media. I always say that.
We need secure borders, fair elections, and a decent person in the White House. But being decent isn't enough. He also needs to know how to be a president.